assume you cut these.
No, absolutely. So you can feel free.
No,
You're a first-generation attorney in your family.
yes, I am.
What caused Lucian Ledestrel to become an attorney?
Well, I was going to be a coach. I enjoyed sports through high school and college, and I went in the Army and thought that I should come back and become a coach. And while I was in the Army, I started thinking about either being an attorney or going in with the overseas or the can't even think of the name of it right now. The service for the United States, where you go overseas as a consulate or something. And I was thinking of going to Washington U, and I made registration at Albany Law School, and they accepted me. And I came home from the service, went to law school, and come out of law school and start practicing here in Jamestown. My wife wanted to stay in Albany because she was from that area, but I always liked the area here, and I enjoy hunting and fishing, which we have very close by. And so I went to law school, graduated from law school, came back here, and been here ever since.
Tell me about your mom and dad.
My dad was born over in Sicily, immigrated here with his family. There was 5 boys and a girl. And my grandpa, the reason we ended up here in Faulkner is my grandfather Ledestrel landed in New York City, migrated to Buffalo, and they started to work in the canning factories in Silver Creek. Then my grandfather got a job on the DAV&P Railroad that ran from Dunkirk down to Titusville, and he became the track foreman.
Okay.
And so he, of course, called all his Lombardi's from over in Italy. And it's funny because my grandfather, Benny, my mother's father, had also migrated to New Orleans, and they were sharecroppers down in the Louisiana area around Moreauville. And so my grandfather got in contact with them and brought them all up. In fact, as you know, Faulkner has a lot of Italian names like the Alessis, the Johns, the Gattos, Polizzis. They were all from the same little town, Vallalongo, over in Italy. And he congregated them all here to work on a railroad, and that's how they got here, to be quite good. Oh, yeah. In fact, Sam Conti's father was one of my grandfather's buddies. And Charlie Mastretta, I don't know if you're old enough, he practiced law. He was from Faulkner. His father came over. And this community was Swedish and Italian. I mean, and they got along well. But so my dad had migrated over, and he got my grandfather Benny up here. And in them days, they had planned marriages, and between the two Kumbadis, they decided that mom and dad should marry, which they did. Right. And of course, the rest is history. They had their 4 children, and everybody's still around, thank God.
Now, your dad, what did he do for a living?
Well, first of all, he was a professional baseball player. He's a very good professional baseball player. He made it all the way to the Boston Braves, but he hurt his arm. Well, he went in the Army. Then he came back and hurt his arm playing with Jersey City. And in them days, they cut him open bad. And he always had a little trouble with his arm. But he pitched several seasons in the minors. And he came home. In fact, he pitched a doubleheader against Poland Center for a championship when I was a little bat boy, when he was 50, I think he was 55. He pitched a doubleheader down at Poland Center. I'll never forget that. Yeah, that was the last time he pitched. But he worked in the furniture industry. He was a laborer, right. Worked in the furniture factories. And he used to like to tell me the story whenever I give him a hard time about money and cars and stuff. They lived on Mosier Street in Faulkner, and they used to walk to Jamestown Taylor up on the boat landing and walk all the way back. And I asked him, well, why did you walk? He said, it saved 10 cents for the bus each way, or the trolley. Right. In Fenton days, they had the trolley. But it's amazing. He used to tell me they'd only make, God, I don't know, $10. Oh, right, no. I can remember during the Depression, he made $11 a week and raised 4 of us, plus Ma. Bought a house, had a car. We never really missed all the things that everybody's got today. But in them days, you had the radio, you didn't have television, you didn't have all these trips. I don't think my mom and pa, took 3 or 4 trips in their life away from Faulkner.
Right.
But they just didn't want to. I tried to get them to go back to Italy.
Right.
I bought them tickets and everything for their 50th. He wouldn't go.
Right. Right.
So he always said that this was his country, and he served over in France during the Second World War, or the First World War, with the infantry. But he liked it here. Ma loved it here. She lived to be 97 years old, just passed away a few years ago. So we had a good life.
And they met here?
Yeah, here in Faulkner. Yep.
So this has been hometown. And then you go off to St. Bonaventure?
Yep. I graduated from Faulkner High School, went to St. Bonaventure, got my degree there in sociology, went in the Army for 2 years during the Korean War, came back, went to law school at Albany Law School, Union University, came back here and set up practice with Joe Gerasi for 13 years.
How did that happen? How did you guys connect?
I came back here, and very frankly, I was broke, and I had some debt, and I needed a job. And the only job you'll like this one. I interviewed with Tubi Scarpino and Ross Spoto, a couple of other fellows I can't remember. And the best offer I had was $30 a week from Tubi. And I told Tubi, I said, geez, thanks for the offer, but I can't really take it. So I got a job working as a claims adjuster. In fact, John Goodell had just left just before me. He was a claims adjuster for Travelers. We worked for Howard Walder. He offered me $100 in a car. Well, hell, in them days, Mickey Mantle only made $100, so I felt I was doing good. And in fact, Bill Cass and I have talked about it over the years. We would have signed a lifetime contract for $50 to $100. But that was my start. I started with the insurance company. And Howard Walder knew Joe Gerasi quite well. And apparently he talked to him about he had this young lawyer working for him that if he ever needed a partner or anybody, let him know. Well, Joe gave me a call, and we had a chat and got together. And so we became partners. I was with him for 13 years until he became the county executive. And then I went in with Art Bailey. I was there for, gosh, I don't know, almost 20 years probably. Then I broke that off, and we, when I was with Joe, we had young fellows, Jeff Weesey came with us out of school, Dick Fessenden, and Paul King, if you remember him, the he became the district attorney. And then when I was with Art, we had several fellows there. We had Mike Goldman, Joe Moran. I'm trying to think. Well, Warren Erickson, John Ward. We had a bunch of guys there. Charlie Loveland was there for a while. And then I terminated, no, let me see. No, at that time, I terminated that. And then I went in with my nephew. My nephew came in with me, John Lamancuso, who's now the city court judge, and Phil Calla. And then later on, Bill Duncanson came in with us. And then later on, we had John Vanstrom and Greg Edwards and Randy Lewis, Steve Cass, who was with us until he became a judge. And then in 2001, I was ready to retire, and Chuck D'Angelo prevailed upon me to maybe come over there and merge our offices. And I felt a little badly. I wanted the boys to have a place to work and the secretary, so I went over there, and I thought it was just going to be a short period, and here I'm still over there. I'm enjoying it. I'm not working as hard as I used to, but I'm enjoying it. And they've been very good to me. And they've taken a lot of burden off me because we've got some very competent people over there. And it's been a pleasure practicing that way. And the last year hasn't been too good. I've had a little illness, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good.
You look good.
I'm feeling a lot better, believe me.
Yeah.
A year ago now, I didn't feel too good, but I'm coming around. I guess the treatment's working.
That's terrific. Wayne Tranmer was one of the first paralegals in Chautauqua County.
And he was with me for 28 years, and he was one of the best.
Mm-hmm.
You could really depend on him. You ask him to do a chore, and he did a chore. And we still keep in contact with one another. He's doing very well. And he just lost his wife, unfortunately. But, yeah, he and I were friends and have been friends. He used to babysit my kids when they were younger. And I mean, he was the most dependable guy I've ever known. Yeah, good fellow.
When you came back, was there really an Italian, Swedish, not only mentality from a population viewpoint, but also regarding professionalism as well? The fact that you would work with either, you mentioned you interviewed with Spoto, Scarpino, Gerasi. They're not Swedish.
Right.
Is that by design?
Yes, I must say yes. I didn't like it. My dad was a great one to bring us kids up, that you take a man for what he is. But I found out early in my practice that there was that element of I don't know if you want me to, no, I better not mention names, but there was that element where the Swedish attorneys didn't treat a young Italian attorney with the same, what do I want to say, the same manner in which they would, say, a young Swedish attorney coming into town. But over the years, believe it or not, it developed that everybody became much friendlier. I've gotten along with all the lawyers. I've had a couple of bad experiences, but that was early in my practice. And that was, I think, I'm not sure if it was, when I came back here, the older lawyers didn't appreciate the younger lawyers coming into town and taking their practice. And that goes for both. I can tell you, my Italian colleagues were very unhappy when I came back to practice. In fact, they didn't want me to practice here. They even suggested I leave town and maybe go to a bigger city. And it was, practicing law was tough in them days, and we didn't have all that practice, and the money wasn't that great, and whatever you took away from another lawyer, I mean, that was taken from them. But it got much better. I would say after into the 70s, the older boys passed away and got out of practice, and it developed a lot. But the lawyers at that time were more cordial, friendly towards each other, worked with each other. There wasn't that element of nationality, if that's what you want to call it. So, yeah, it's, well, I think you saw it probably. We've had, if I recall, I think we've had 2 blacks that came to Jamestown to practice, and unfortunately they just couldn't make a living here. They were not treated well by the attorneys, by the community, and they had to leave. But, people in the Jamestown area I think have come a long ways from at least from my experience back in the 40s to today, they've come a long ways. They've intermarried. In fact, I married a English girl, and I can remember some of my lady relatives couldn't believe that I was going to marry someone who was non-Italian, But we've come a long ways, and I mean, we've tried to teach our kids that, life is such, you take everybody for what they are, whether they're Italian, Swedish, Germans, Irish, Spanish, it doesn't matter. You take them for what they are. And it's worked out well.
Faulkner, though, was really a Ross Spoto, pretty much the Faulkner Italians when you came back?
Yeah, when I came, well, there was 3 of them. There was Ross Spoto, Sam Conti, who was a Faulkner boy, and Charles Mastretta, 3 of them. And the only lawyers in town at that time, Sam Edson, his father was here before him, and the Crosby boys, Judge Crosby. But they when I come back here, the only other practicing attorneys in Faulkner besides the 3 that I mentioned was, oh my gosh, Shagnon and took his office over, as a matter of fact, after I left Joe Gerasi. Gerald Herrick. Herrick and Shagnon. And Shagnon had left. He had gone out to Vermont, I believe. And so Gerald Herrick had his office upstairs of what in them days was First National Bank of Faulkner, and then became Chautauqua National. And I took over his office here in Faulkner. I was there for, I don't know, I must have been there for 4 or 5 years anyway, before I went with Art Bailey and Warren Erickson.
Robert Jackson's last partnership was with Ernie Lee, Gerald Herrick, and John Durkin.
Correct.
And Gerald Herrick, I don't know much about. Tell me about him.
Very nice man. He limited his practice. He did a lot of real estate work, corporate work. He very seldom went to court. He didn't like the courtroom. He was a very quiet man. Very easy to get along with. I mean, if you showed him that you were right and he was wrong, he'd agree with you. He was a nice fella. Nice fella. He, in later years, after I took over his practice, he went to Texas. His son's a lawyer in, I believe it was Dallas, one of the Texas cities. And he went down there and stayed with him until he passed on. Mm-hmm. He was a widower. He lived on Buffalo Street. And just before I took his practice, his wife passed away, and he wanted to get out of here. And he had a boy and a girl, and I think they were both in Texas. I know the boy was a lawyer in Texas, and he went out there.
That's a good lead, because this guy may still be around.
I think, I'll tell you who would know, is Connie Rounds, who works for
Ward
Westerberg. She was his secretary.
Well, that's terrific.
And Connie did keep in contact with him, because I know I needed a couple of affidavits after he left, and she got them for me. So she might know. He was in Texas.
That's terrific. Well, Ernie Leet.
Oh, he was a gem.
Yep.
Ernie could make a constitutional problem out of a simple matter. And he, you had to love him for it, and at the same time you disliked it, because he always, no matter how simple the problem was, he always made it difficult. Only because he was a brilliant mind, and he loved constitutional problems, and he would turn a simple thing into a constitutional problem. As you know, he was on the New York delegation when they had the convention, the Constitutional Convention, and he was a very stalwart Republican. He was in politics. I think he was town attorney for several years, and he had a brilliant mind. But the problem was you couldn't do anything simply with him. It had to be drawn out. No matter what it was, he always drew it out as such. But he was a good fellow, a heck of a nice guy. He used to hang around with Tooby and Travis Look. They used to hunt and fish together. And when Bill Cass and I came back from law school, incidentally, we graduated together at Albany. Tooby and Ernie took a liking to us. Mm-hmm. And Tooby had his camp up there, and he'd invite us up, and we'd have some real nice parties. And I mean, they were just great. That's what I say. To me, they treated me great. I never had any problem. Travis, Ernie, any of them fellas, I never had any problem with them. And I've enjoyed. I've had several years of practice, and I've enjoyed it all.
Well, let's go through some of these names here. I brought a composite, and you might be somebody, as you go through that list of guys, like Tooby. Tooby Scarpino, I remember him well. And in fact, we had a camp in Panama and sat in with Tooby in a trial.
Oh yeah, when he shot the fella.
Yeah, I could identify with that, as we got a lot of break-ins in our camp as well.
Well, I can remember. I mean, as a digress, I can remember Tooby telling us how he stayed overnight there a few nights waiting for this fella to come back, and sure as heck he came back and he shot him in the butt. Then he got in trouble for that. But Tooby was a good guy. He was a rough, gruff guy. When I first come back here, he gave me much trouble. In fact, when I remember one time, he really lit into me, vulgarly and otherwise, and I hung up on him, and I wouldn't call him back. He kept calling 2-3 days, and I wouldn't call him back. And finally, Joe Gerasi came in and says, "Hey, look, you got to settle this thing. The guy's driving me crazy. He's calling me." So I called Tooby, and I explained to him that, hey, I may be young, I might be kind of naive, but I'm certainly able to take care of myself. And it's too bad that you're not younger. I come down there, we'd settle this once and for all. Believe it or not, after that, he treated me, you couldn't treat anybody nicer. Always good to me. I used to love to go up to his office. He had that darn spittoon, and he'd sit there and he'd talk to you and spit in the spittoon, But he was a very colorful person. Very colorful.
Respect for everything. I remember that.
Oh, he's a nice guy.
Travis,
In fact, before he died, he even named me as his executor in his will, and that made me feel pretty good.
Absolutely.
I mean, the change from when I first went to him and he offered me $30 till when he died, I became his executor, And I mean, he was a good fella. We got along very well. We had a lot of matters together, and he was very well.
Ross Spoto.
Ross was a very unto himself a lot. He didn't socialize an awful lot. Good lawyer. He was limited to what he did, but he was an excellent lawyer. And he, as you well know, he had a lawyer wife and a lawyer son and a lawyer daughter, and he had a good practice. He had a very good, speaking of Italian practice, he had probably one of the best Italian practices. In fact, his son has inherited it. He's done very well by it. And Doug's a good, competent lawyer. And Ross was a very, very, very astute lawyer. He handled mostly real estate and estates and collections. He was a terrific collection attorney. And I can remember back when his son-in-law, Paul Sirocco, came in with him. And we used to have a justice court in Jamestown. And man, they had a list of collections there that was unbelievable. They'd be over there all morning sometimes on their collection matters. But no, Ross was a good lawyer. And Doug is a good lawyer. He's been a very good lawyer.
Mike Lombardo.
He was my favorite. The one thing I can always remember about Mike, and I had a lot of trials with him, is he never spoke down to a witness or the jury. You see these guys that come in there with all this verbiage and try to impress the witnesses in the court and the jurors. Mike was down to earth, one of the nicest, softest speaking people you ever met in your life, and a very, very excellent criminal and trial lawyer. And I can still remember one of the first cases I had with him was a cow case. I represented a fellow who sold some cows to his client, and for one reason or another, there was a defect in the cows, and so he brought the action. We were up before Judge Fancher, and I remember we were all ready to sum up, and Mike says, Your Honor, may we approach the bench? So he and I approached the bench. And he looked at me and he says, Lucian, he says, before I get a verdict, he says, I want you to put in your damages. I'd gotten so wrapped up in the case, I forgot to put my damages in. But that's the kind of a guy he was. He was such a great, honest, warm guy. He would never stick it to you. I guess is what I want to say. And it was amazing that he would bring me up to the bench and tell me that I hadn't finished my case before I was ready to do my summation. I mean, and that's the kind of a guy he was. And when I was younger, he did a lot of favors for me. I'd call him and ask him his opinion on matters, and he never would say no. Very, very, very take his time and tell me come over. He'd be happy to show me, or he'd talk to me for several minutes on the phone, and he was always cordial right up until the time he passed on. Now, his partner was a little different story.
Claire?
That was, oh gosh. What the hell is it?
Clarence Pickard.
Now, Clarence Pickard was a very astute lawyer. He never went to law school. He got a clerkship through his father, who was a lawyer. He never married. And he would practice law from 5 o'clock in the morning till midnight. He's probably one of the most well-read attorneys we ever had in Jamestown. But he was a big man. He did not make a very nice appearance, and he was a gruff son of a gun. So, of course, in the courtroom, you had that advantage because he was kind of gruff with the jury, and the witnesses, and he never was a very good trial lawyer, but he was an excellent man with Mike Lombardo because he did all his research. And in those days, they were the big guns in town. Willard Cass, Sr., who was a terrific lawyer, Mike Lombardo, and let me think here. Some of the guys that were really good trial lawyers. John Goodell would match up with a lot of them. He was a tenacious guy, as you well know, and we got along very well, though. Thinking back in the olden days, I can remember I had a lengthy trial with Willard Cass Sr., Mike Lombardo, and Terry Durrell. Terry was a good young lawyer. He got into politics or something, he didn't practice much later. But we had that thing lasted, gosh, I bet it lasted 2 weeks up in Mayville. That was quite a trial we had up there. And then Joe Gerasi and I had some very good trials up there before both Fancher and Phillips. And I don't know if you remember Sid Hughes.
I do.
Sid Hughes was district attorney on one case. We had a fellow was charged with arson in the first degree, and Sidney prosecuted the case. Joe and I defended it, and we got a no cause. And I can still remember Sid steaming out of the courtroom and calling Joe and I every name in the book. He was really hot, really hot. He felt he couldn't lose that case, and it was interesting. In fact, I'm trying to think who's the young man that's on morning WJTN. He carries the early program.
Webster?
Doc Webster. Well, his father was Doc Webster before him on the radio, and he was also a fire investigator. In fact, he was one of Sid Hughes' key witnesses in that trial, I remember. And we thought we were going to get hurt by his testimony, but somehow we won that. It was interesting, though.
Talk about some of the judges at the time. I mean, you obviously did an awful lot of litigation work.
When I was younger, yeah, we did a lot of litigation.
Was O'Connor?
Well, in my years, we had, first we had Fancher. Well, we had the Supreme Court judges that came down from Buffalo. They were always coming. We didn't have a Supreme Court judge until Fancher. Okay. So then we had Fancher, and then subsequent thereto, Judge Phillips, who was a surrogate, became county court. And we had some cases before him. Then we had Ed O'Connor, who was a district attorney when I first came back here. He became a judge. He was a colorful fella, nice Irish fella from Dunkirk. He enjoyed a good time. He was a good judge. He wouldn't take any abuse on a stand, and he'd move you along if you were delaying a case at all. But he was fair. He was a good guy.
I recall it was good to have the cases in the morning rather than after.
Oh yes, he enjoyed his vibations in the afternoon, so it was better to get him in the morning, because if he come back in the afternoon, sometimes he's a little rough. But he was good. But we had another guy. I don't know if you recall, he may have passed on before you, but Dixon from Fredonia was the workers' compensation hearing officer, and he was a brilliant mind. In fact, his brother was a doctor here for several years in Jamestown. He was a brilliant mind, and he was great in the morning. But boy, in the afternoon, you didn't want to be in front of him, because he'd come back half schnockered, and it was a complete Jekyll and Jekyll and Hyde. Unreal. I'm
not sure this is a segue or not, but I found dealing with Howard Crosley in the same vein.
Yeah. Howard was a very intelligent young lawyer, good lawyer. But he had his tendency in the afternoons to go over at Mr. B's and have a couple libations, and in the afternoon he was a little difficult to deal with.
Theatrical.
But he was a nice guy. Howard and I were members of the Dirty Dozen for many years until he passed away, and I had many, many enjoyable times with Howard. He was a real nice guy. Good lawyer, nice guy.
Well, let's talk about the Dirty Dozen. How did that get started?
Well, a group from Faulkner started. They fished together, And there was the two Lathrop brothers, Sam Edson, George DeBell. Trying to think some of the older guys. Then it was Bill Raddick and Ivar Homeland. And they bought a island up in Canada. And what they did is they'd go one full week with everybody, and then you had a choice of a week with your family or friends. So everybody would get 2 weeks a year. Mm-hmm. And you could go up there, and we had a caretaker that would take care of the place for it. It was a beautiful camp. It got, believe it or not, it got washed out. It was on a sand island, and every winter the wind would blow and we'd lose more sand and lose more sand. As a matter of fact, we gave it, I don't remember, Orky Headland was a member of the DD, and he also was a member of East Side Fellowship. And we gave him the camp when it was ready to fall into the lake. And they went up there and they saved it for a couple of years. They put some tarps where the sand was and stuff. But it was a fishing club, as was. And then once a year, we'd go for a football weekend out of town to see a college game on Saturday and a pro game on Sunday. And it just got into a pattern, and we did that every year. And as the older fellas passed away, of course, we took on new younger members now. And it's still in existence, still goes, same thing. Half the guys go fishing up to Canada. Some of the other fellas don't participate, but they all go on the weekends that we have in fall for football. We've been to, I don't know, 2 or 3 Super Bowls. We've had it's a good group of guys. They all get along well. And once a month you have a meeting. It's your responsibility, but it's carried on for quite a while. I guess probably it's been over 40 years now.
What a hoot.
Oh yeah, they're good, great bunch of guys.
Tell me about some of these other attorneys that you even kind of predate me a little bit. Well, for example, your paths, I don't know if they ever crossed with K.T. Johnson. I mean, Kenny was a tough guy.
Yes, he was. In fact, unfortunately, I asked him to leave my office once, and he asked me to leave his office once. My nephew, John Lamancuso, was handling the matter, and he was representing a corporate client, and he thought that Kenny had the personality that he was always right, no one else was right. And so young John was handling this matter. He comes in the office. He says, I've got KT in the office, and he says, he's really giving me a tough time. He says, would you come in and see if you can help me? So I walked in, and we were discussing, we were representing some seller. He was representing a corporate buyer, and he was telling young John what he was going to do, how he was going to do it, and why he was going to do it. So I looked over the papers and listened to what I finally told him. I says, Kenny, I think you're wrong. I think John is correct, and I think that's the way it's got to be. Kenny was the kind of a guy, don't tell me what we're going to do, I said, well, I'm telling you what we're going to do. We're either going to do it that way or you don't have a deal. Well, he really got rambunctious. So I said, Kenny, I think it'd be better if you left. And I asked him to leave, and I ushered him out. About a year later, this goes back a long time, because about a year later, the IBM man had just come in with the new typewriters. Instead of the manuals, a new electric typewriter. And he said that KT in his office had bought 2. If you'd like to see them, I'll make an appointment for you to go over, and you can watch the girl operate them. So I said, fine. Some lunch hour, let me know. So he calls me and tells me, and apparently he cleared it with John Peterson, who was Kenny's partner. And John and I always got along good. Right. We were very good friends. And in fact, our families got together quite often in the summer. He had that cottage up the lake, and we had him down the house. Anyway, and his wife and the kids. But I'm sitting over there. I remember I was sitting on a radiator, watching the girl type, not saying a damn word. Kenny Johnson walked by. He come by again, then he walked by again. Finally, he stopped, and he said, what the hell are you doing here? I says, and the IBM salesman was there, and he says, we're just allowing Mr. Ledestrel to view the operation of the new typewriters that IBM came out with that you purchased. Get the hell out of here and stay out of here. And I think he thought I was getting some information off his papers or something. I don't know what he was thinking. But he threw me out of there. So we exchanged throwing each other out of their offices. But Kenny was a high-spirited guy, he was very capable. He was great with the Interstate Commerce Commission. one of the best in the country, they tell me. And he had a good, terrific practice. But I can still remember him, and I used to go to Losandro's for lunch all the time, and he'd come in there with his colored socks. I remember that. That was a treat. He'd come in with a nice blue or black suit with white socks or green socks. I mean, it was unbelievable. But I can still remember. Towards the end, we were cordial towards one another. But he was not one of my favorite lawyers. Oh, yeah.
Al Teener, right?
Yeah, Al was here with them for a while. And then he retired down to South Carolina at Myrtle Beach, and he's still down there. He came in here from Ohio, or Indiana, with the, he had something to do with Altel, I think. At that time, it was probably Jamestown Telephone. I think it was when they merged with Altel. Mm-hmm. But he came in and he practiced with them for a while. He did a lot of the corporate work. He didn't do much of the, he didn't do any criminal work or matrimonials or anything like that. He did a lot of corporate work, if I recall.
Bill Harrison?
Excellent lawyer, and a real nice guy. And it was a tragedy to see him die of cancer. Mm-hmm. Bill was a very excellent, good athlete. I played baseball and basketball against him. He went to Cornell. And he was an excellent athlete and had a very aggressive, good criminal trial lawyer. And he loved it. He was was he the first public defender, I believe? I think so. And he really would fight for a client. And he was a very good lawyer. And John Peterson was an excellent lawyer, and he died too young of a heart attack. He was in his 40s. They were both great guys. Were in the same office, nice guys. In fact, Jimmy Abdallah came in about that time, and Ron Malin. They had a good practice there.
Did you come in with a wave of people?
Yeah, quite a few. We had, now that I think back, Arison, Abdallah, Malin, me. Art Bailey came a little later. Dick Pheasant came a little later. Jeff Weesey, Paul King. Leslie Boys, Bill Cass, what's his name? Bob Seidel, who just passed away. In fact, Bob Seidel, Bill Cass, Ben Peralt, who died at a young age from Salamanca, right, and I were the four guys at Albany Law School from this area. We all graduated together. Yeah. Ben Peralt was a good lawyer, too. He died too young.
Sam Alessi Sr.
Was
he active?
Very active. That's an interesting situation. You were talking about the Italians and the Swedes. Sam Alessi married Mayor Carlson's sister. And that was probably one of the first intermarriages in Jamestown, in the Jamestown area. And believe me, in them days, they were intermarriages. Today it's black and white and Spanish and white, but in them days, believe me, back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, that was a intermarriage. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Sam had a real good practice. He had a good Italian practice, and he had a good Swedish practice. He was also very active. He was corporation counsel for many, many years. He represented a lot of organizations. He was a well-liked man, very quiet man. Very well-liked man. I don't know of anybody who didn't like him. In fact, I can remember one of the first times I was ever in a law office was when my grandfather Onyabenny passed away, and my mother had to go up to sign some waivers, and I went with her. That was the first time I'd ever been in a law office, and he was very cordial and very nice to me. He was a nice man, good man. And then his two boys, of course, Sam and Bobby. Sam became the city court judge after Berglund. Mm-hmm. And Bob and Sam never really, for some reason, never picked up their dad's practice. Mm-hmm. Their dad had a terrific practice. They did all right, but they never seemed to pick up the old man's practice.
D. Lawrence Carlson, was he with Alessi?
Yeah. Sure. They were together at one time, right, I think until the boys came back. And then D. Lawrence had Howard Crosley, who was a relative. I don't know if he was a nephew or somebody. But Howard went in with D. Lawrence and took over D. Lawrence's practice. D. Lawrence was a very distinguished looking man, And he did very well. He had a pretty good practice. He had Swedish practice. And I can remember he was a member of the, I think they had a name over at the town club. They'd sit in the back corner there. Sam Alessi was there, and D. Lawrence, and I can't think of the accountant's name. He was a CPA in town. There was 10 or 12 of them. They ruled
The round table?
the round table. They ruled all of what was good and bad about Jamestown. But I remember going over there for lunch, and they'd be over there every day, settling all the problems of the community. They were a great group there.
Who were some of the other big firms? When you came back, Price Miller?
Price Miller, and then there was Tom Flowers and Evans came back about the same time I did. You had Johnson, Peterson, Tiener, and Anderson. Your firm was, Sherry was with, when I came back here, Sherry was with Phillips and Rogerson. Phillips became a judge, and he was with Rogerson, and they were over in a hotel. And I remember, Rogerson, was a story in and of himself. He was a good lawyer. He just, I think he had a little greed.
At the time you came back, though, was his reputation as a corporate lawyer?
Oh, yeah. He had, Phelps Can Company and another big company. And he was doing very well. He was right on top of the herd then.
Right.
He was doing very well. Got himself in trouble with that Judge Mikulski, who gave him a hell of a write-up in the reports there. I can remember that. But, no, he was good.
You ever noticed, by the way, just an aside, was there any reason why nothing was ever really done from a formal side because of Rogerson? Was it
We always felt it was because of his big name and his big money.
Yeah.
And he was up in years. They never really, I think they censured him or something. They didn't do anything. I thought they were going to disbar him, to be honest with you. I thought it was a disbarment. It should have been a disbarment proceeding. But they never went that far. I remember because I remember reading in the some of the journals, I think they censured him, if I recall correctly. But it was bad for our profession, of course. We've had a couple of bad ones, but I guess in every bucket of apples, there's got to be one or two rotten ones, and
Sure.
we've been fortunate. I would say that our bar, as a whole, are good people, and they try to do good. We got a couple of young guys right now that disturb me a little. They seem to want to walk on the edge, and I don't like that. I mean, you can walk in the middle just as easily as you can on the edge. You know that from practicing. But all in all, the practice has been good. It's been good to me and my family, and I've enjoyed my relationship with almost all the lawyers. I've really never had any real problems with any of them. I've had some very enjoyable times with the others, and it's been good to me.
If you look down that list, anybody jump out and say, gee, now there's a character as you go through it. By the way, was Bainbridge Colby around when you came back?
He was here and died not too long after. Speaking of that, I'm trying to think of his name. He was a war correspondent, lived in a hotel. He became Judge Fancher's buddy, and he didn't practice, but Fancher used to give him all the appointments for assignments. So you get $25 here and $50. He kept I can't think of his name. It was in the paper not too long ago.
And he is in the composite that's before this one.
Yeah, right.
It's the 47 composite. He's actually right at the top.
Yep, I can't think of it. I think it starts with a B.
Yeah, man, you're right.
But I can't think of his name. Well, anyway, he was a colorful guy. I can remember he didn't have much hair, and he let it grow in the back. Boswell. Anyway, he very colorful, and he was a war correspondent during the Second World War. Very colorful guy. I mean, he had stories. He could tell stories like no one else. And I can still remember, as a young lawyer, every Monday morning, I'd go up to Mayville, and Judge Fancher or Judge Phillips, whoever was the judge at the time, would give me 3 or 4 court assignments, and we didn't get nothing. Absolutely nothing. You had to take the assignment. You had to work the case. take it right to the end and take it on appeal if you had to. You got nothing for it. In fact, it used to cost me money because the guys would want the guys in jail would want cigarettes and stuff, and I'd buy it for them, you know. But it was interesting. Then subsequent, as you know, they got the public defender, and then they start giving the guys a little bit of money for helping out. Not much, but something for each case. But when I was thinking of that war correspondent, he used to, when I was really young, Joe Gerasi and I would go over to Gandy's, and we had a little get-together with Al McKee and Al Olson and
Marcus Conley.
Mark Conley, and we would solve a lot of problems there. But believe it or not, we solved a lot of cases there.
Yeah.
But anyway, Al Olson, I got to tell you this one. Did you know Heimbaugh, Lyle Heimbaugh?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, as you know, Lyle Heimbaugh's father owned that railroad and had left him pretty well off. Well, Al Olson used to really get frosted. He was in with Bob Booty and Olson, and they had Heimbaugh in there. And Heimbaugh had a desk in the back, and they would load it up with all this mail. Well, then they'd call over and tell Al Olson they're going to turn off the gas or the electric or water or something because he never paid his bills. Heimbaugh. And Al would get furious because he'd go back there and here'd be thousands of dollars of coupons, checks, that he never opened. And yet he wouldn't pay his bills, you know. And Al used to come to those. I remember coming at lunch and he'd be cussing and cursing how he had to go over and pay a check for Heimbaugh's to keep the utilities going, you know. But no, they were interested. As a matter of fact, I just saw Bob Booty last night at dinner. And he just retired. Not retired. I guess he's still practicing at home. But he's got to be getting up there in years, too.
He was one of the pallbearers at Jackson's funeral.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Bob, good lawyer. Nice guy. I always got along good with Bob. Al Olson was a nice guy. I saw Park Ketchbull the other day, too. And he's been with us for quite a while. Yeah, I had quite a few deals with him. And he looked pretty good. He's getting heavy like me, but he looked pretty good. And as you know, Bill Cass and I have been friends since we went, before law school, we played sports in high school together. And we played the Muni League baseball. And it was funnier than heck because he was in the service the same time as I was. And I had not seen him that summer. And go to Albany. I'm standing in the line registering, and I look, and I kept thinking, gosh, I know that fella. So I goes over, and sure as heck, here's Bill Cass and I were registering together. And we've hunted and fished together ever since Albany. We hunted and fished in Albany. We've done it ever since. We've been to out west several times, been up to Canada several times, and we've been very good friends. Our families have been good together.
By the way, just as an aside, I'm going to turn this off to tell a story. It's a menagerie.
Who we got here?
How you used to fight like crazy in court, and people would think, oh my God, they're coming to blows.
Oh, yeah.
Walk outside, what time are we going in the morning?
You and
Bill.
Bill?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they would have
Well,
some
we had
battles.
we had some battles, and you'd think we hated each other. Then it was over. Hey, what the hell? Same thing with Bob Seidel. I mean, Bob was such a great guy.
Yeah.
And then we get done, and he'd never want to go home. You know, we'd end up at the bongo room, get half schnockered.
Well, I still, to this day, you're a legend, you and Spoto having lunch at Lysandro.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's my ultimate pessimist. Jesus Christ, nothing is good for him. Nothing. He's got the world by the ass.
Yeah.
But nothing is good.
Jeez, it's too funny. You guys are the best. Marcus Conley, did you do, I was here when he was here, but he didn't seem to do much.
Towards the end, he didn't do an awful lot. He was in with the two Weeks brothers, right? Stanley and...
Could be. I kind of remember him with offices next to Sam Conti. I don't know if they were anything.
Yeah, well, he did. But I think he was in with Stan and... no, I'll take that back. No, he wasn't. What do you call it? Let me see. It was Ross, Stan Weeks.
Emmett Ross.
That was her uncle. You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Emmett Ross was her uncle.
Right.
He was a well-to-do lawyer in town. He did a lot of work when I first come back here. He was very active. And Ross was his nephew. He died fairly young. He did a lot of defense work. He was a claims adjuster. I remember he told me he was before in his younger days, and he did a lot some defense work. And as you know, Stan, I mean, he practiced right up until, I guess he still goes in the office. Although I heard, did he have an injury or
He
something?
fell, he hurt himself, he went to the hospital, rehab, and now I see him at
Okay.
lunch, at dinner the other day.
Yeah, well, I saw his wife up at the Cancer Treatment Center.
Right.
Yeah, he was up there with her. But there was a gentleman, all the time a gentleman. Stan. Oh, his brother Ross was too. Yeah, I was thinking here about, what's his name? Do you remember Laugenslaughter? Al Laugenslaughter? Art Laugenslaughter? Art he only did real estate for Philip, or for,
The rights, wasn't it?
right. You're right. Right. And he did all their real estate work for him. I remember when I come back, he was the big man on the real estate work. Yep. So.
Clive Wright?
Yep. Clive was a very good lawyer, very aggressive as an assistant district attorney. He was all right. In the courtroom, he was a tiger. Outside, he was kind of a nice fella. His brother, Bob, was an excellent lawyer, had that physical problem, but he was an excellent lawyer. And I always got along well with him. And his brother, Bill, who is a real gentleman, always was a gentleman, a good guy, good lawyer. Never had no trouble. And the kids are doing very well. All the young rates are doing very well up there with Mark Hampton. Mark came back here a little after I did. And he's been with them since he came here with the Wrights. He's a senior member over there now. And then as far as my firm is concerned, the younger guys are doing great over there. They really helped me out. They picked up my load and are carrying me. And they're excellent lawyers, all of them. Kevin Lammer, Chuck D'Angelo, Dick Fessenden. Grace Hanlon's a good lawyer. Mary Schiller's excellent. You got, I'll forget somebody, Dan Galati does a lot of the comp and the Social Security, and then you got Greg Edwards is doing most of the matrimonials. We got a young guy there by the name of Pete Johnson, he's doing a lot of the city court work and matrimonials and custody matters and stuff of that nature. And Randy Lewis he's picked up a lot of mine. He's doing a lot of real estate and estate work and wills, trusts, things of that nature. I don't know, I hope I named them all. If I didn't, I'm sorry. Anyway, there's been a lot of good lawyers around. I remember Bill Blood was an excellent defense lawyer, excellent. Had a lot of cases with him. In fact, he was a Bonaventure boy. And he was kind to me when I first come back here. He helped me out a lot. He was a very easy to get along with fella, and he never give you a hard time. Ernie Cockcroft had to be before your time.
I vaguely remember.
Well, when I came here, he was an old lawyer, and I was a young lawyer. I was a real young lawyer. In fact, one thing that still sticks out in my mind, one of the first real estate deals I had was for my sister and brother-in-law, and Ernie was representing the seller. Well, Ernie always felt that the young lawyer should come to his office, pick up the papers, and then when you're ready to close, you come to his office and leave the check. And I just asked him, I said, why can't you mail the papers to me? Because I'm not going to mail them. And he would not mail them to me. So I'd have to go to his office, pick up the search and other papers, take care of everything, get ready to close, call him up, make an appointment, go over and close with him at his office, because he wouldn't let me go unless he wouldn't give me the deed unless I gave him the check. You know, I mean, he was a funny guy, a real funny guy. He was well respected in the community, I believe, but typical old time funny fella. But we got along all right. Sam Edson, I've mentioned before, he was a sweetheart. He was a easygoing, nice guy, good lawyer, never give you trouble. And he helped me out when I was young. In fact, I had a problem once with an estate, I remember, and he heard about it, and he called me up and volunteered to help me, and helped me out of the problem that I had. Good, nice fella, good fella.
Was Walter around then?
Yep, Walter. But he passed on shortly thereafter. And the same thing with the Crosbys. In fact, I almost bought Harley Crosby's house over on James. I was going to buy his house, and we weren't too far apart. I think we were $1,000 apart, but I couldn't come up with the extra 1,000, and so I never bought it. But yeah, he was a good fella. He practiced here in town for a long time. Who else we got here? Emmett Ross. Well, the two Price boys, Sam and Charlie, they were here for many years, and then they were good fellas. I never had any problem with them. We had a lot of dealings, never had any trouble.
Were you around when Wilson Sr.?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He always wore a patch. Why
Yeah,
was
he had a problem. I think he had, what do they call it? Not vertigo, where one eye didn't focus the same as the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And so that caused him a little bit of a problem. But yeah, he came in every morning. Sam would, or Charlie would pick him up every morning. They'd stop and get the newspaper, and he'd go to the office. He was there. He was there when he was in his 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember him well. And
Walter Miller.
Walter Miller, excellent lawyer. He was with Price Miller for many, many years. And I remember Willard Cass Sr. used to tell me stories about how when he first come back here, Wilson Price would throw him little bits and pieces of criminal matters to take care of because he had so much practice, and Willard didn't have any. And Mike Lombardo, too, same thing. He told me how Wilson was his, when he first come back here, how he'd throw cases at him, which was interesting. And Charlie Goodell, I played sports with him, and he died too young, too. But as you know, he did well, became a congressman and everything. He didn't practice very long after he was here just before me, and when I came back, it was Van Vlack, McKee, and Goodell, and he became a congressman shortly after I came back. I did play baseball with him a few years here when I came back. Charlie Phillips was a nice fella. He was in with Kenny Johnson's office there. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of real estate. He was a nice fella. Milt Sigworth was a good lawyer, very active Democrat. In fact, I think he was chairman of the Democratic Party, corporation counsel. He left us too early. Who else we got here? Lynn Van Vlack, yeah, he was here. He was just going out of practice when I got here. Jeff Weesey, we mentioned, who passed away young. Emmett Russell. Sam. Dan Isaacson was also a character. Dan was a big man, good-looking man, and was very active. He was a Swedish consulate before John Sahlstrom. And one thing about Dan, he would never call you on the telephone. He would write you a 3-page letter that said nothing. I mean, he could have put it in 2 sentences, but he'd write you a 3 or 4-page letter. And I got to tell you, one day we had a closing, and he sent over a check, and I closed, and I was 3 cents short on my computations of some tax prorations. That's the only time I can remember him calling me. He called me up. He said, Lucian, he says, I think your computation on the taxes is an error. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. He said, I think you owe me 3 cents. I said, okay. So I got a little piece of cardboard paper, pasted 3 pennies on it, and mailed him a letter and apologized for the error. I could not believe he would call me for 3 cents, but he did. But that was an interesting one. Oh, we had some over the years. Hell, I've been practicing a long time. So, but we've had some good ones. We've had a couple bad ones, but I try to forget the bad ones and remember the good ones. Lynn Hartley is now a hearing officer down in Allegheny County, as I understand it. And he was the surrogate here for several years. Al Ford's down in South Carolina now. Phil Erickson, I understand, is just retiring. His father was a pretty tough guy on me. As a matter of fact, I probably shouldn't tell you, but I'm going to tell you. When we come back here, Emily was a secretary, and she went out and tried to get a job. So the Employers Bureau sent her over to Alton Erickson. So Alton brought her in and interviewed her. Everything seemed to be going along good. He happened to look down at the name. He said, Ledestrel. She said, yeah. Which one? Lucian Ledestrel. He said, well, you said we wouldn't have any use for you here, you know.
Oh,
But anyway, I just thought you'd appreciate that one.
well, it was a time.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, yeah. And as you know, Sherry Cadwell was a good lawyer, and I still see him around, and we get along very well. Dalton Burgett and Robbins, they're still kicking around here pretty good. Ray Anderson, I guess, is retired now. He did a lot of employer-employee relations work and handled a lot for the schools.
Mm-hmm.
But all in all, it's been a good life. It's been a good life.